Before the bridge at Elbow Woods was built and during its construction, ferries were located in several places along the river to provide a means of crossing the river more easily. Yeah, I believe there's a series of ferries up and down the river. I've seen pictures of them. I was listening to an interview yesterday with August Little Soldier, and he mentioned that they would cross by horseback or team of horses and buckboard, I guess you'd call it. And he mentioned something about he would be taken across first by his father, and they would set up a camp, and then his father would have to go back for the rest of them and get them across somehow, either through I don't know whether the buckboard floated or what, but it was a process apparently, and they must have known the river and known the easiest place to cross, I'm sure.
And then the ferry, I just barely remember the ferry, and then it quit, But we used to cross on the ferry too then. You just drive on, and then you get on the side and wait, and then it takes us across, and then we didn't take the wagon. Usually my aunt and them had a car, so they'd take us to town. And then we'd leave our team there, and then we'd come back across.
I remember the Lucky Mound Ferry. I think there was a guy named Johnson ran it a while. That's all I remember. I remember only coming on horseback. When we went to Independence, it was a long horseback ride, so we didn't go too often. I remember once we thought, well, we'll go back across the bridge, across the ferry, because there was a ferry ran across Independence. You could get straight across almost to Independence, to Lucky Mound. And I remember going over there there was me, Buddy Mason, Richard Grinnell, probably Saunders Bearstail, and the ferries were pretty rickety then too. They were, and I'm not sure, they probably had a rope. I don't know how they got across, whether they just went across with a motor or something. But I remember that we took our horses on there, and I think they charged us a dime for a horse. But I think actually they didn't even charge us anything that time. But I remember I was riding a real wild, kind of a touchy, big brown horse, and I when we drove to the ferry, I was thinking, all them damn horses are going to go down. They were tamer than my horse, and my horse isn't going to go on there because it was a very touchy horse. I was very nervous. And I thought, I'm going to have to ride all the way back around by myself, and it was kind of getting toward afternoon, So I crossed the ferry once with a horse, with our horses. So it must have been big enough to take our horses on there.
We had a ferry boat, and Hint, or somebody, rather, yeah. And they come across, and they take you across for like a couple of dollars or something. And some of them had cars then, and some had teams. When they get in a team, they drive down in, and the horses get scared, So they unhook the horses, and then somebody has to hold them in front, stand by them. Then the team would stand still, And we all get in that boat, and then that boat just takes us across and waits till we all get off, and then they'll go back,
When the bridge at Elbow Woods was closed to traffic in June of 1953 and dismantled, ferries were put in place to provide a way to cross the river and to help with the relocation of those people still remaining in areas that were to be flooded by the reservoir.
I remember when it was closed to vehicular traffic, and when the construction crews came in, and the news bulletin that we talked about there carried a article that the bridge will be closed as of a certain time. I think there's even a reference in there to the last car that crossed the bridge. So yes, I remember very well. And then there was a ferry installed. So if you had to cross the river at that time, you had to take a ferry. And I think, the planning, at that point, the planning was getting to be, a rush to get things done. So sometimes it happened that the ferry wasn't running, or, you know, became difficult to get across the thing. So here's a community, a large-scale move going on. All of a sudden, the bridge is gone. How do you get across? You know, how do you move livestock? How do you move household goods? And I'm sure that it created a lot of hardships by removing the bridge so early. The ferry was run by, I'm not sure, it was I think a Bureau of Indian Affairs ferry, or staffed by someone that operated the ferry. Prior to the bridge being built, you know, there was several ferries in operation. But after the bridge was built, I'm not sure exactly who ran the ferry and how long it was in operation, but it was probably the only way to get across from Elbow Woods to Halliday or to some of the new communities that were being set up.
So they tried to make a crossing on the water, of course, with boats, rowboats or whatever, but it it's pretty hard, but that's why cable ferry was the thing. So they did start a cable ferry, and the thing I remember about that, it was that some truck load of grain was lost off the back of the cable ferry. Yes, I've crossed it.
What was that like?
Well, you're afraid it's going to tip over. It was kind of a rickety thing.
Well, when they took the bridge out, they didn't know how to use the ferry to go over.
Mm-hmm.
But I took the combines and the tractors over. On the combines I took over on the ferry, not the tractors, they used the bridge yet. And then that summer in June, when the bridge was taken out, we got the tractors home, but the combines I took across on the ferry, one at a time. And well, we did, years before that, we moved across the bridge all the time with the combines. We had to stop the traffic with such a narrow bridge. And the combines, well, they're 14 foot wide, cutting edge, about 16 overall width. And we had to go across with a pickup and stop the traffic, and then the combine would come. Yeah, no, we used that a lot. And then 9 years. When we took the combines over on the ferry, that was in '53, in the fall. We took one at a time, but that was a pretty big load for that ferry. That was kind of wasn't a very big ferry, kind of a cottonwood floor and everything else. And then in the fall, I had planned on coming back with it on the ferry too, but in the meantime, the truck went down with a load of wheat. Down, that rolled off of that ferry, and then I said, that's it, I'm not going to try that. So I had to come across the dam, but I had an appointment, a certain day and a certain hour that you could come across the dam when they were refueling. That's the time they would let you go through. And it took about 2 weeks to get that appointment. Well, then I went over on the ferry with the pickup and took the men along to drive the combines. We used the ferry to take the combines over, but then coming back and forth, you had to gauge yourself according to the guy that was running the ferry. Just one ferry. If he wasn't at this side, I had to wait until he comes back to pick me up, and then if it got a little windy, why then he didn't want to go. Well, it was just a trap door, you might say, for a ramp. The ferry come up as close to the shore as he could, and then he'd let that down. It was a plank deal, and then that would hit the shore line, and then you drive on it, and then when you're up there, he'd lift it up, and that would hold you on there, and then you'd go. If you're going north and you had a west wind, he didn't care to go because you had waves, and it would drift you off shore. And they just had the paddle in the back for moving it. By the time we got on and got off, Oh, yeah. I think the best part of an hour was gone. See, he'd get up there and then he'd load you and try to get everything in place so it wouldn't roll off.
Sure.
With a pickup, you could set the brakes, but this truck that was a load of wheat, and it backed up and it hit his ramp, and that gave away. The rope tore, and then the truck went down. And his wife was in the pickup. The rear wheels went off of the ferry, and then it got hung up on the frame for a while. And they just got a hold of her and pulled her through the door. They went down there. They had guys that went down with the diving suit. Well, it wasn't just that deep. I think it was only 20 or 30 feet deep, something like that.
Whose truck?
See, I was running a ferry just up the road, just a little ways. So I bought the ferry from Hintz boys that had the ferry. Everything that come along, we hauled across, you bet. So the guy that hauled across, when I should haul him across, and I told him no. I said, I ain't going to haul you across. I said, I got to have something to balance the ferry. I said, load you up, I says, and there I'll be. I says, it'll roll off. And I told him, I said, take my car. I begged him to take my car and go home and come back the next day, and then I could get customers to come across, you know, so I get the balance the ferry. But anyway, we lost the truck. I couldn't. He wouldn't listen to me. I said, take my car. I said, go home. I said, come back in the morning. And I said, that will have customers come, so they get a chance to balance the ferry. That was quite an experience, that was. Well, it was getting dark. I'd closed up we had a light on the crossing on the south side, and we'd shut that off. Because I made on the last trip across, see, because we lived on the north side. And so that's what happened. As soon as the ramp went down on the north side, where the ferry tipped, you know, still down there. Yeah, I lost a new truck.